You were for one of the first SWAT officers on the scene?
No, I was a supervisor.
Supervisor.
Mhm.
How soon were you there?
Jerry and I got there at the same time because we were having coffee together
Jerry.
at the John's Guard at the Central Shops. So it's kind of one of those that we, the normal shooting came out, what was then perceived to be the normal shooting at the Aurora Theater.
You're thinking this is like a normal thing?
Oh yeah, it sounded totally like normal until a minute or two later when the updates started. And that's usually what, your average run-of-the-mill shooting incident, you get a call of a shooting or whatever, and then some initial information, and then it's pretty quiet because people are going, and then guys will show up and that kind of a thing, but you don't have a lot of chatter from a dispatcher. And in this particular case, we heard the shooting, went, okay, we're just down the street, so if they need us, we can be there pretty quick, and continued on what we're talking or doing or whatever. Then the updates started coming up, multiple shooters, multiple shots fired, people running out of the theater, this and that. It was like, it turned out it wasn't your run-of-the-mill parking lot altercation type thing.
Yeah.
So,
did you go into police mode at that point, or what did you do?
oh yeah, we looked at each other and went, this is not what we thought it was originally, and so hop in the cars and take off.
What did you see when you got there?
So when I got there, it was pretty much massist area. I mean, even getting into just the parking area was a little challenging. I think there was some road construction at the time, so I actually went through some wet asphalt to get through there. Luckily, I was driving one of the expeditions, so I didn't really care. So you just plow through it and go, and it was congested enough with people that I had to park pretty far away and then run in to get in there, because to try to navigate through the people with that big car, you would have hit somebody or, whatever. It's just totally untenable.
Is there a moment when you can sort of recall vividly now that you just sort of said, okay, this is what we were hearing on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
This is the real deal.
So when I got there and ditched the car, I started to run towards the entrance that was the closest to me, which I think was the northwest one. And there were people streaming out of it, people streaming out of the front. Somebody had propped open the door with a bench, because usually those are locked, and at the time I didn't know what from was from the tear gas that was kind of permeating the whole building. And so as I'm running towards the door and people are running out, then I'm hollering at them to get out of the way. I've got a gun in my hand, and then as soon as you hit the door front, it's like, okay, all the noise, everything is going on. You're like, all right, here in the next 30, 45 seconds is when I get shot. So here we go.
You thinking that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're waiting to get shot.
Well, yeah, okay, so I am. For whatever reason that night I don't have my rifle with me. I've just got my pistol. So you're taking a 45 caliber pistol up against what all the reports are saying is some type of a rifle based platform or whatever, and the odds on that are never good, for obvious reasons. Your body armor in those types of situations is worthless. So, yeah, you run into that going, okay, I'm probably going to get shot, or am I going to die or not? Well, that's a die toss, because most of the time we see lots of people get shot and they don't die. So that's kind
Walk
of
me into that mentality, though. I mean, like it's that police officer mentality where you're like, okay, this might be the day.
Well,
I get shot.
It's not like it's totally emotionless.
Well, that's what. Tell me what's going in your mind.
You've got adrenaline pumping, and you're breathing hard from running, and your mind's going 100 miles a minute. And right after I had that shot, I actually went. There's another officer, I don't even know who it was, coming in the back door. And, thank God we're both in uniform, because none of the plainclothes guys are there yet, because we're both pointing guns at each other. Pause. Okay. Move on down the row here to where the theaters were. So, I mean, it's kind of a natural, at least to me, it seems like it's a natural assumption when you're going into something like that. And it's not like it's over. A lot of times when you would go to a run-of-the-mill shooting, it's over. Somebody's been shot. Whoever it is has fled in this vehicle or whatever. This is something where as you're running into the building, you're listening to reports of additional shots fired here, additional shots fired there. It sounded on the radio like it was bigger than it was in terms of how many shooters there were, not, the disaster, but in terms of how many people were involved, we didn't know how many. The common perception, at least for me at the time, was definitely more than one person. And so when you have all these people running out and running around and screaming and everything like that, who's the bad guy? You don't necessarily know until you're right up on or unless you hear, gunshots or that kind of key you in a certain direction. But so it's pretty chaotic, and I mean those are things that were running through my mind when I went in. But then once we had the oh shoot moment, trying to censor myself there, when two of us cops are pointing guns at each other thinking we're the bad guy coming in opposite doors, then it's kind of a mental reset. Okay, that's fine, let's move on in here. And that's when some of the training and in a large case I think just experience takes over, and you're like, okay, I've got these tasks that I need to accomplish and go get things taken care of. So
Do you still see that night a lot? I mean, do you think back to that night?
At times I do. I have the luxury that a lot of the other guys don't have of no longer working with Aurora. And so that being the case, I don't see the theater every day. I live 2 states away from here. So that daily input is now gone. So it's kind of more in a memory phase a little bit. There's not a constant reminder of it. However, there are weird things that will pop up, like that fire alarm thing I was talking about earlier. The theater at the time, their emergency alarm system was a really unique sounding one. And honestly, I don't know if I'd heard one or at least paid attention to one that sounded like that before. So now there's certain types of, fire alarms or anything like that. Whenever I'm out and about, if I hear that, that'll snap you right back to that brr, brr type thing it had going on in there. So there's not so much smells because, it was the predominant smell was tear gas for me. And so I don't encounter that hardly ever anymore. So, which is a nice thing. I got plenty of that while I was on duty. It's largely little clips or sounds or stuff like that. Like I said earlier, my wife and I were big movie buffs before all that happened, so we just plowed through and made it continue to happen. So that doesn't, unless there's something that's really, really, really similar in like a scenario or whatever in a movie or on TV, I don't necessarily think about it that way. I think what prompts it more for me is sometimes the sounds and maybe occasional flash images or talking to people, folks that I keep in touch with back here in Denver.
Some people back here are still struggling a little bit, aren't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? I mean, it's just this.
Well, it's tough. I mean, I actually consider myself lucky in the situation that I'm in because again, I'm not drowning in that stuff day in and day out. I remember that I had a couple years I was here after that before I left the department, and you go to court, it's right across the street. You go here, it's right there. You have to go across town to do whatever, it's right there. You can't get away from it. Aurora's not that big, and it's pretty centrally located to where all the things are that you do in the city, especially as a police officer. So for me, that part's been a nice thing because it's been a complete disconnect. You're in a completely different state. I was a police officer in that state before. I used to work for Kansas City, Missouri PD before I came to Aurora. And so I associate a lot more of those memories on a day-to-day basis. And my old partner still works for KCPD. He's getting ready to retire. And so some of those guys. And so it's almost like 2 different lives.
So why come here today? Why talk about this?
A number of reasons. I know that for a long time that there's been kind of for lack of a better term, a gag order on talking about this. There's various reasons for that. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with. But I think a lot of people did a lot of good things that need to be acknowledged for that. I think that some people didn't get the credit they deserved out of that, and I know most of them will say, oh no, not me, but I mean, it's something that I looked at and I was disappointed with how things were handled in the aftermath. It's good to just talk about it too. I mean, because with me being out of state, I don't come in and sit down and we go have, a couple beers and everybody talk about this. That's more with the guys that are here every day around each other. I'll have sidebar conversations from time to time with guys like James that I'm pretty tight with, and Jerry and others, but for the most part, I'm kind of, in my particular circumstance, completely separate from it. So for me, it's kind of a nice closure, and for those of us that worked that night, especially the graveyard shift, there was very little closure over the whole incident. We were back to work within 12 hours in some cases. Guys that were deeply affected that night. As a supervisor, I had to decide if they were even, roadworthy to go out and work. Or if they went out and work, I'd have some guys ride with a partner because they didn't want to be by themselves and were still processing what had happened before. And so, I think it's nice for everybody to kind of get that closure. And I know at one point during the group interview, Jerry talked about, not even knowing who the people were after the fact. And, I've got this picture I think I told Anastasia about over the phone where I ran into this teenager female who was one that was pretty badly shot up. And I vaguely remember her getting out of the theater, but I couldn't tell you her name. She's a wonderful young lady. I ran into her at the Starbucks right before I left the department, actually. So I've got a picture of her that I keep because that was like a success moment. Okay, here's somebody we actually helped. And because guys go into police work going, I'm going to save the world, I'm going to help people, and then 3 years into police work you realize that you're a professional referee for 1% of the population, and they don't like you, and they don't want you around, and and so this whole helping people thing that you go into this profession with sometimes goes out the window, and you can go 10 years and count on your hand the number of people you've actually helped, especially if you're working high crime areas and stuff like that. I mean, it all gets lost in there. And so that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come be a part of this, is because this was an event that I think a lot of new people that become police officers think that they're coming to do. This is we're going to help the universe moment, and we're going to help people and be there for people. And this is one of those events where that truly happened.